If you don't want to wake up at 35 wondering where your money went, why you're stuck, and why everyone else seems to be getting ahead while you're barely surviving, then listen closely. Because there are 9 financial disasters silently destroying people long before they ever realize it. And the worst part? Nobody warns you. Not your parents, not school, and definitely not your friends. These disasters don't hit you all at once. They creep in slowly, silently, quietly. And by the time you feel the damage, it's already too late. Let's start with the first disaster, the one almost everyone falls for. Now let's move on to the first financial disaster. When I was 22, I made the dumbest money mistake possible, and I didn't even know I was making it. I got my first real paycheck, a little more than I had ever earned before, and immediately thought, I deserve better now. So I upgraded everything. Better clothes, better phone, better nights out, better everything. I wasn't improving my life, I was upgrading my ego. Fast forward a few months. I'm earning more than ever, yet somehow saving nothing. And that's when I realized the truth. You don't stay broke because you earn too little. You stay broke because every time you earn more, you spend more. Lifestyle inflation is sneaky. It doesn't hit you with a big purchase, it hits you with 20 little ones. My old phone still works, but this new one looks nicer. I can afford a more expensive gym now. Let's get nicer groceries. I've earned it. This car feels old. Maybe it's time for an upgrade. Before you know it, your income has increased. But your savings? Still at zero. Here's the worst part. Lifestyle upgrades feel harmless because they don't happen in one massive jump. It's tiny daily increases that quietly build a financial prison around you. Let me show you how the trap tightens. Imagine you start earning $500 more per month. Most people don't invest that. They don't save that. They simply absorb it into their lifestyle. A $60 upgrade to their phone plan, an extra $80 eating out, $120 more on a nicer apartment, $100 more on convenience spending, $50 more on subscriptions, $90 more on random life stuff. There goes your $500, gone unnoticed. And by 35, this habit becomes deadly because now you're not fighting to build wealth, you're fighting just to maintain the lifestyle you inflated. Want the fix? Live like you earn one level below your real income. Not above it, not equal to it, below it. Because wealth isn't built by earning more, it's built by resisting the urge to upgrade every time you do. Now let's move on to the second financial disaster, and this one destroys people far faster than alcohol, bad relationships, or any poor habit they pick up in their 20 seconds. I'm talking about high interest debt, the trap built through credit cards, payday loans, and buy now, pay later schemes, all wrapped up in friendly marketing designed to make you feel wealthier while they quietly drain your future. What most people don't realize until they're deep in the hole is that debt doesn't wipe you out with one dramatic moment. It chips away at you quietly, slowly, and invisibly until one morning you wake up and realize you're working just to stay afloat. I've watched smart, capable, hard-working people fall into this trap, not because they were reckless, but because the first step into debt looked harmless. A £200 shopping splurge, a $600 phone upgrade, a small $70 buy now, pay later payment that felt manageable at the time. But then the next month rolls around, another swipe happens, another emergency pops up, another minimum payment is added to the pile, and suddenly you're carrying a balance you never planned for. What people forget, because banks will never emphasize this, is that you don't stay in debt because you overspend. You stay in debt because the interest keeps you there. Let me show you how painful that really is. Take a $1,000 credit card balance at 21% interest. If you stick to only the minimum payments, you won't clear it next year or the year after, but in almost 10 years. 10 years for $1,000, and in that decade, you'll end up paying over $2,300, which means the bank earns more from you in interest than the value of what you originally bought. Now scale that to reality. The average American isn't carrying $1,000, they're carrying $6,000 to $8,000. Many sit between $10,000 and $20,000. And some have been paying minimums for years without moving the needle at all. That's not financial hardship, that's financial servitude, because you're essentially throwing your income into a leaking bucket. No matter how fast you pour water in, the interest drains it faster than you can refill it. And while you're busy fighting these payments, you're not building wealth, you're not saving, you're not investing, you're not moving forward. You're just running on a financial treadmill that speeds up a little more each year. When I first started my business, I made a rule for myself that saved me from this trap. I would never buy anything on credit unless it directly made me more money. Tools, equipment, business upgrades, yes. Clothes, gadgets, fancy holidays, and ego purchases, absolutely not. And that rule kept me free, because every dollar borrowed at high interest steals a piece of freedom from your future self. By the time most people reach 35, they realize they spent years paying interest instead of buying opportunity, the opportunity to invest, to start a business, to switch careers, or simply to breathe without financial pressure hanging over them. Debt kills your options, and when your options die, your potential follows. So here's how you fix it. 1. Never borrow for lifestyle. If it doesn't make you richer, don't finance it. 2. Snowball your smallest debts first. Momentum matters. 3. Build a 3-6-month emergency fund so life surprises don't push you back into debt. Your goal is simple. Make interest work for you, not against you. Debt is the silent killer of your 20 seconds. Regret is the loud one waiting for you in your 30 seconds. Financial disaster number 3 is one of those traps that doesn't announce itself loudly, doesn't look dangerous when it begins, and definitely doesn't feel like a bad decision when you make it. In fact, it often feels clever, modern, smart, flexible, and convenient, which is exactly why so many people fall into it. And that disaster is renting your lifestyle, instead of slowly building one you actually own. And I don't just mean renting your apartment. I mean the entire pattern of living on borrowed comfort, leasing cars you can't afford to buy, financing phones every year because you want the newest one, paying monthly for furniture that will never belong to you, committing to subscription services you don't use, signing up for buy now, pay later like it's free money, renting tools and equipment instead of owning the essentials, and stacking small, just $20 a month commitments until your entire life becomes one long list of silent payments you barely remember agreeing to. Now here's the painful part. None of these things feel like a big deal individually. A $30 subscription here, a $49 lease payment there, a $20 add-on, a small monthly financing plan, they feel tiny, harmless, forgettable. But stacked together, they quietly drain hundreds from you every single month, thousands every year, tens of thousands by the time you hit 35, all without giving you any equity, any ownership, or anything that appreciates in value. That's the core problem with renting your lifestyle. You keep paying, but nothing stays with you. Your apartment doesn't become yours. Your leased car doesn't become yours. Your financed phone doesn't become yours. Most subscription benefits don't accumulate or compound. You're essentially living inside a financial treadmill where everything resets each month, and the moment you stop paying, your entire lifestyle collapses. Let me tell you how I learned this the hard way. When I first started experimenting with building my radio-controlled models, I didn't have the cash to buy proper tools. So I did what everyone told me was smart. I rented everything. The drill presses, the saws, the sanding tools, even the workspace. And for the first few months, it felt amazing. Low upfront cost, no big commitment, no long-term risk. I thought I was being extremely clever. But when I sat down at the end of the year and added up everything I had paid, I realized something embarrassing. I had spent way more renting equipment than it would have cost to simply buy used tools, take good care of them, and own them outright. And that hit me harder than any business failure I ever had. Because I realized the truth most people avoid facing. Renting is cheaper in the moment, but ownership is cheaper in the long run. Renting gives you comfort today, but ownership gives you freedom tomorrow. And freedom is something people don't feel slipping away until it's already gone. That's why by 35, so many people find themselves stuck, not because they're lazy, not because they don't earn enough, but because every part of their lifestyle is tied to recurring payments that leave them with no flexibility, no breathing room, and no way to invest. So what's the solution? The shift is simple but life-changing. Start owning the essentials: tools, equipment, work devices, transportation you can actually afford, basic furniture, and anything that saves you money over time. Audit your subscriptions and remove every single thing that doesn't add clear value to your long-term goals. Replace leasing with buying wisely. Opt for used instead of new when it gets you the same functionality. And slowly reduce the number of monthly payments you depend on. Because the moment your lifestyle stops renting space in your wallet and starts living inside assets you own, your money stops running away from you and starts working for you. Financial disaster number 4 is one of the quietest traps people fall into, especially those who are actually trying to improve their lives. And the irony is this: the more ambitious you are, the more likely you are to get caught in it. I'm talking about having too many inputs, too many voices, too many opinions, too many experts, and far too many directions pulling your mind apart until you're mentally exhausted long before you've made any real progress. Most people think their problem is not knowing enough, but in reality, they know far too much. They've consumed endless videos, posts, and advice that contradict each other so heavily that they're stuck in constant analysis mode. They're drowning in strategies, smothered by potential paths, and overloaded with opportunities, yet unable to choose even one and stick with it. Picture this: you're standing in the middle of your life while your parents tell you to play it safe. Your friends push you towards something trendier. Finance gurus insist you invest aggressively. Career advisors warn you about risk. Social media flexes unrealistic success stories. And strangers online preach entrepreneurship, crypto, real estate, dropshipping, freelancing, going back to school, or doing all of them at once. Every one of those voices pulls you in a different direction, and after enough pulling, you're completely drained without moving an inch. That's the disaster. Too many paths don't help you move faster, they stop you from moving at all. And when your mind is overloaded, the default isn't action, it's paralysis. I learned early on that if I didn't control what went into my head, I'd spend my life spiraling around in circles. So I flipped the question. Instead of asking, "What should I do?" I asked, "What future do I actually want?" And once my destination became clear, I reduced my inputs. I picked 1 or 2 mentors instead of 10 conflicting ones. I focused on the few skills that genuinely increased my income instead of chasing every shiny opportunity. And I filtered everything through one simple question: does this move me toward my destination or pull me off track? That decision changed everything. Because the truth is, you don't need more advice, you need better advice. Your brain has limited bandwidth, and when you fill it with conflicting roadmaps, you end up going nowhere. But when you commit to one clear direction, you move forward faster than most people ever will. If you hit your 30 seconds still switching plans every few months because someone new sounded convincing, you'll waste the years when momentum matters most. And wealth doesn't come from chaos, it comes from consistency. Here's the fix. Choose your direction. Reduce your inputs. Follow people who've built the life you want. Ignore voices that pull you away from it. Stick with one path long enough to see results. Because too many inputs don't accelerate your growth, they freeze it. And that paralysis is a financial disaster you'll deeply regret by 35. Financial disaster number 5 is one of the most destructive, not because it makes you lose money quickly, but because it stops you from ever becoming the kind of person who can create wealth consistently. And that disaster is being ego-driven instead of growth-driven. Most people don't realize this, but ego is the enemy that sneaks in through the front door wearing confidence like a mask. It convinces you that you already know enough. It tells you that you're too smart to learn from others. It whispers that you're the exception, not the rule. And once you start believing that voice, your financial life begins to crumble slowly, quietly, invisibly, until you hit your mid-30 seconds and wonder why everyone who started after you is somehow ahead of you. Let me explain exactly how ego destroys wealth. When you're in your late teens or early 20s, it's easy to think you've figured everything out. You watch a few business videos, try a couple of side hustles, make a bit of money, and suddenly you feel unstoppable. Your confidence skyrockets. You think you can skip the boring parts and jump straight to the rewards. You ignore the details, rush the foundations, and convince yourself you don't need help, guidance, or patience. And that's exactly where ego ruins you. Because ego doesn't tell you to take action, it tells you to shortcut the process. It convinces you that you're too good for the small steps that actually build mastery. It makes you chase the flashy outcome while ignoring the boring fundamentals. I've seen this pattern thousands of times. Someone starts learning a skill, video editing, coding, copywriting, sales, whatever, and instead of becoming a master of the basics, they give up halfway because it's too slow, too repetitive, or not exciting enough. Their ego expects instant results. And when the results don't come fast enough, they jump to the next skill, then the next, building nothing, completing nothing, mastering nothing. By 35, this creates a brutal reality. You've tried everything but succeeded in nothing. You've started many journeys but finished none. Your ego protected your pride, but it destroyed your potential. Let me give you a personal example. When I was younger, I had a manager who made my life miserable. He bullied me, humiliated me, and constantly belittled my work. And instead of letting my ego take the wheel and lash out or quit in anger, I made a decision. I would treat that job like a paid apprenticeship. I would learn everything I could before I walked away. Why? Because ego reacts. Wisdom extracts value. By swallowing my pride and focusing on learning instead of looking good, I built a skill set that later helped me design, manufacture, and sell my own products. If I had let my ego guide me, I would have stormed out and learned nothing. My entire career would have been very different. That's the danger most people ignore. Ego makes you feel powerful until life humbles you and shows you how expensive that attitude really is. Here's the truth you need to hear. Ego is the comfort zone for your mind. It avoids anything that challenges it, which means it avoids the exact experiences that would make you wealthy. And this is where people ruin their 30 seconds without even realizing it. They refuse mentorship because they think they already know enough. They dismiss feedback because it hurts their pride. They avoid learning new skills because it makes them feel like beginners again. They chase shortcuts because their ego can't tolerate looking like they don't know what they're doing. The fix? You must adopt what I call the iceberg mindset. What you know is just the tip, visible, obvious, and small. What you don't know is the massive structure underneath, hidden, deep, and essential. The moment you accept that 90% of what you need is still beneath the surface, you free yourself from ego and open the path to growth. And growth, not pride, is what builds wealth. By 35, people regret their ego more than any financial loss. Money can be earned back, skills can be rebuilt, opportunities can reappear. But the years wasted avoiding growth because your ego was in charge, those don't come back. Financial disaster number 6 is one of the most destructive habits people carry into their 30 seconds without even noticing it. And it's the reason so many hit 35 with the same income, the same frustrations, and the same excuses they've been repeating since their early 20 seconds. I'm talking about the habit of blaming everything around you instead of taking responsibility for the things you can control. Let's be honest, life isn't fair. Some people start with advantages, others start miles behind. Some get lucky breaks, and some get hit with setbacks they never asked for. But here's the harsh truth most people don't want to hear. Blame freezes your progress, while responsibility moves it forward. And the moment you choose blame as your default response, your financial growth stops long before your potential does. Here's how this usually plays out. The moment something goes wrong, a bad exam, a missed opportunity, a toxic boss, a difficult month, most people immediately reach for what I call the magnifying glass, and instead of looking at themselves, they zoom in on everyone else. It's my boss. It's the economy. It's the government. It's my parents. It's the system. It's bad luck. And the more they repeat these stories, the more powerless they feel. Because when you blame everyone else, You make everyone else responsible for your results, which means you lose control over your life without even realizing it. I'm not saying outside factors don't matter. They absolutely do. But what matters even more is how you respond. I learned that the hard way when I was working in my carpentry apprenticeship. My manager bullied me relentlessly. Every day felt miserable, and every part of me wanted to quit and blame him for making my life harder. And if I'd walked away in that state, I would have left with nothing but frustration. Instead, I made a decision. If I was going to suffer through the job, I might as well extract every ounce of value from it. So I treated the apprenticeship like my personal training ground. I learned the tools, the techniques, the way things were built, and I developed a level of craftsmanship that later helped me build a global model aircraft brand. If I'd chosen blame over responsibility, those skills and the wealth they produced would never have existed. So many people sabotage their financial future in the same way, but quietly. They blame teachers for results they didn't study for. They blame bosses for jobs they don't put effort into. They blame landlords instead of budgeting. They blame the system instead of building skills. They blame the rich instead of investing. Blame becomes a full-time job and improvement becomes no one's job. And here's the dangerous part. Blame feels good. It protects your ego, it keeps you comfortable, and it creates a story where nothing is your fault. But that comfort costs you your growth, because every time you blame someone else, you hand them the steering wheel of your life and say, "You're in charge of what happens to me." That's the real financial disaster. The fix is what I call the mirror habit. Instead of grabbing the magnifying glass, grab the mirror and ask yourself, what part of this can I control? What could I have learned here? What can I do differently next time? What action can I take right now? What responsibility is actually mine? This isn't about guilt, it's about reclaiming power. The moment you shift your focus inward, you stop being the victim of your circumstances and become the driver of your outcomes. By 35, people who rely on blame end up stuck, bitter, and financially stagnant. But people who take responsibility, even when it's uncomfortable, become skilled, adaptable, resilient, and far wealthier than they ever expected. Wealth doesn't start with a bank balance. It starts with accountability. You can't fix what you refuse to own. And the longer you avoid responsibility, the longer you delay your own success. Financial disaster number 7 is one that sneaks up on people so slowly they don't realize they're trapped until it's too late, and by the time they hit their mid-30 seconds, the regret hits harder than any financial loss they've ever experienced. I'm talking about staying in your comfort zone so long that it silently turns into a life sentence. Not because you made one big mistake, but because you avoided small, uncomfortable steps that could have changed everything. Most people don't call it a disaster, they call it playing it safe. But let me tell you something. Comfort doesn't protect you. Comfort sedates you. Comfort convinces you that staying still is the smart option, when in reality, it's the fastest way to lock every door to the opportunities you claim to want. People build their entire lives around safety, the safe job, the familiar routine, the predictable friendships, the easy habits, and because nothing feels dangerous, they assume nothing is going wrong. But when your life never stretches you, you slowly lose the courage and confidence required to adapt, grow, and move into bigger stages of your life. What looks safe on the outside becomes a quiet prison on the inside, with walls you don't even recognize until years have passed and your potential has shrunk to match the size of your comfort zone. By 35, this habit turns into a permanent lifestyle. People stay in jobs that stopped challenging them years ago. They avoid learning new skills because being a beginner feels uncomfortable. They stick with the same routines, not because they're happy, but because change feels unfamiliar. They settle into patterns that slowly drain their ambition, convincing themselves they're fine while deep down knowing they're falling behind. I learned this lesson early. School made me feel like I wasn't smart enough to succeed. But instead of staying in that environment, I stepped out of the predictable path and took an apprenticeship. That pushed me into new situations. Then I experimented with side hustles, which expanded my world even more. Eventually, I took a bank loan and started my own business, the biggest risk of my life at the time. And years later, when I could have easily stayed comfortable, I stepped into another uncomfortable arena and started a YouTube channel at 53 years old. Every major win came from stepping into discomfort. Every regret I avoided came from refusing to stay in the same place. That's the truth most people miss. Nothing grows inside your comfort zone, not your skills, not your opportunities, not your earning power, and definitely not your wealth. People don't stay broke because they're unlucky. People stay broke because they stay still. And in a world that moves fast, staying still is the same as moving backwards. The fix isn't reckless risk, it's controlled expansion. You stretch your comfort zone one small step at a time, learn a new skill, take on a challenge, enter a new environment, try something that scares you just enough to grow you. Because the biggest financial disaster at 35 isn't failure, it's realizing you never even tried. Financial disaster number 9 is the mistake almost everyone promises they'll fix someday, yet somehow someday never comes, and by the time people hit 35, it's the one regret that hurts more than any bad purchase, any debt, or any missed job opportunity. I'm talking about delaying investing because you're waiting for the right time, the right income, or the right amount of confidence while quietly losing the most valuable wealth-building decade of your life. When you're in your 20 seconds, investing feels like something future you will figure out. You tell yourself you'll start once you earn more, once your life stabilizes, once your debts shrink, once you understand the stock market, once you've saved enough, once you feel ready. But here's the truth that hits hard later. Life never creates the perfect moment, and waiting is the most expensive financial decision you can make. People think they missed the big opportunities because they didn't buy Bitcoin at $300 or Tesla at $5, but that's not the real loss. The real opportunity they missed was time, because time is the only wealth multiplier you can never buy back once it's gone. Let me show you how brutal this mistake really is. Imagine two people. Person A invests $200 a month starting at age 22. Person B invests the exact same amount but starts at 32. Same contribution, same return, same discipline. But when they hit 60, person A has around $800,000. Person B has around $300,000. That 10-year delay cost person B $500,000. Not because they invested less, but because they started later. And most people don't delay 10 years. They delay 15, sometimes 20, sometimes forever. People don't stay broke because they never invest big money. They stay broke because they never invest early. I learned this lesson the hard way. When I first started making real money in my business, I didn't invest. Not because I didn't want to, but because nobody around me did. My parents didn't. School didn't teach it. Everyone acted like investing was something rich people did in their 40 seconds. So I delayed. And that delay cost me years of compounding I will never get back. And the same thing is happening to millions of young people today. They think the market is too high, too low, too volatile. They think they need more money, more knowledge, more certainty. They think they'll start tomorrow. But tomorrow quietly becomes next year. And next year becomes 35. And by the time they finally start, half their compounding runway is already gone. So how do you avoid this disaster? 1. Start small and automatic. Even $20, $50 a month matters. Let time do the heavy lifting. 2. Stick to simple investments. Index funds, ETFs, dollar cost averaging, no gambling, no timing. 3. Pay yourself first. Treat investing like a non-negotiable bill, not an optional idea. 4. Stop chasing perfect conditions. You don't need perfect timing. You need consistency. 5. Let compounding work for you. Your job is to plant seeds early, not grow a forest overnight. Because here's the one truth every wealthy person discovers. Nobody regrets starting early. Everyone regrets waiting. Start now, even with tiny amounts, and your future self at 35, 40, and 50 will thank you with a life built on freedom, not financial pressure. Now that we've gone through all 9 financial disasters you'll regret by 35, Let me leave you with the truth. Most people avoid their entire lives, the truth I wish someone had told me when I was young enough to actually use it. People don't end up broke because of one major mistake. They end up broke because of tiny habits repeated for years, habits they never questioned and never corrected. And instead of facing that, most people spend decades blaming everything around them, the economy, their upbringing, their boss, their luck, without ever looking in the mirror and admitting, my results come from my repeated choices. When you look back at the 9 disasters, the pattern becomes obvious. Lifestyle creep steals your raises. High interest debt steals your freedom. Renting your lifestyle steals your stability. Too many inputs steal your clarity. Ego steals your growth. Blame steals your power. Comfort zones steal your courage. One income steals your security. And delaying investing steals your future. Individually, they slow you down. Together, they create the financial breakdown. Most people hit in their early 30 seconds the moment they realize they've quietly lost 10 years of compounding and opportunity. But here's the good news. You're not at that moment. You're ahead of it. And that means you have the rare chance to avoid the regrets most people carry into the rest of their life. My mentor told me something that changed my direction completely. He said, "Your future isn't built by big decisions. It's built by the small ones you repeat without thinking. You don't need to overhaul your entire life tomorrow. You don't need to be perfect. You just need to start doing the opposite of the disasters. Live below your income. Avoid debt. Own assets, not appearances. Cut the noise. Drop the ego. Choose responsibility. Push your comfort zone. Build a second income. Invest early and automatically. Do a few of these consistently and your life shifts. Do most of them and your future transforms. Do all of them and you'll hit 35, not with regret, but with momentum. Your 20 seconds are not for impressing people. They're for building the foundation the rest of your life will depend on. If you want the next step, the step-by-step guide on exactly what to do every time you get paid, it's in the next video. But before you go, hit subscribe if you want to build real wealth and avoid the disasters most people never escape. All right, I'll see you over there.